Good. So although today isn't summer church, we're sort of starting the summer church series today. So what that basically means is in summer church, we keep the service to an hour, so the preach has to be shorter. But I get to do a summer church sermon, but don't have to keep it shorter. So hopefully, no, I'm just joking. But so we're going to be looking at a number of the Psalms over summer church. And I'm looking at Psalm 1 today. That's not to worry. We're not going to make our way through every single psalm because I think we would be here. I was thinking about it. I think we would be here for about 3 or 4 years if we did a psalm every Sunday. So we're not going to do that, but we've got a few different people coming to bring a psalm. And as I said, I'm starting with Psalm 1 today. So I'm going to dive straight in and read Psalm 1. Blessed is the one who does not walk in step with the wicked, or stand in the way that sinners take, or sit in the company of mockers, but whose delight is in the law of the Lord, who meditates on his law day and night. That person is like a tree planted by streams of water, which yields its fruit in season, whose leaf does not wither. Whatever they do prospers. Not so the wicked. They are like chaff that the wind blows away. Therefore, the wicked will not stand in the judgment, nor sinners in the assembly of the righteous. For the Lord watches over the way of the righteous, but the way of the wicked leads to destruction. Great. So in this psalm, what we can see is we don't actually know who wrote this psalm. A lot of them are attributed to David, as you would know. This one we don't actually know. It may well have been David that wrote it. But we aren't sure. And what you can see is this psalm it's a bit of an antithesis of each other. You can see it compares two very different ways of life. And if you've got phones or if you want to grab a Bible, it might be useful because we're going to go through it quite systematically. But what we see in this psalm is that it starts out by comparing two ways of life, and then it kind of plays itself back on each other time and time again. So blessed is the man who does not walk in the counsel of the wicked. And then it kind of compares that to people that choose. So that's like one person who chooses not to do things. And then it kind of does the opposite. And it says, let's go on. And then it goes on to compare that with someone that delights in the law of the Lord. So we see the two different people here, the two different ways of life. Someone that chooses to walk, sit, and stand in a particular way. And then someone that chooses to delight in the law of the Lord. And we see the outcome of that. And we're going to start by looking at the outcome. So what happens if we follow the advice of this psalm? So let's get you involved. What happens if you follow this psalm? What do you become like? A flourishing tree. A tree planted by streams of water. So let's just unpack that a little bit. What does being a tree planted by streams of water really mean? What is the benefit? If what this psalm sets out, there are two ways for us to live. One is to become a tree planted by living water. And the other way it describes it at the end of that is the wicked. They're like chaff that the wind blows away. So let's think about the tree for the moment. I think there are some characteristics that I thought of with the tree. So one thing, if the tree is planted by living water, by streams of water, it's going to see growth. It's going to be becoming mature. It's going to be becoming better. It's going to be becoming stronger. It's not dying away. And so we start to see growth. So I don't know about you, but that's something I want. I want to become a better person. I want to become more in love with Jesus. I want to kind of be a better dad, better husband, all those sorts of things. That's what I want to be. And that's what this talks about. It talks about growth. The second thing is permanence. A tree is permanent. I don't know if any of you remember when that tree was chopped, when the tree was chopped down that happened in Yorkshire. You know the really famous sycamore tree? I can't remember what it's called now. The Sycamore Gap, exactly. That tree was planted in the 1800s. And do you remember the national outcry when that tree was pulled down and torn down? There's something about a tree that there's meant to be permanence. There's meant to be steadfastness. Think about the roots of a tree going down so deep, keeping it solid, keeping it in place. Really in contrast to the chaff that's blown, that's taken by circumstances. I was reading a little bit about the two seas that you see in Israel. You can go from the Sea of Galilee, and then you can drive down to the Dead Sea. They're about 3 hours apart. The Sea of Galilee is abundant with life and fish, and as the name gives out, the Dead Sea is obviously dead. There's nothing alive in there. Does anyone know why the Dead Sea is dead? Full of salt. And why is it full of salt? Anyone know? There's no outlets. Yes, thank you, Matt. Exactly. There's no outlet. Whereas the Sea of Galilee, it has inflow and outflow. It's a sea. The Dead Sea, it has water flowing in it, but there's no outlet. There's no way for it to go out. And that comes to the third part we see. He is like a tree planted by streams of water, which yields its fruit in season. There's a productivity to someone that's growing. The tree is growing. There's an inlet, because that's healthy, but there's also an outlet. They let the water come in and they let it flow out. So if you're going to be a healthy tree, then that is one of the kind of benefits we get from listening to this. We have to be in and out, taking out and yielding that fruit. When we see in the Bible it talking about fruit, yielding its fruit in season, we know it's talking about things like how we bring the kingdom. It's talking about spiritual growth. And so what we're seeing here is that if we follow the advice of this psalm, we become healthy because we become productive. We're able to take things out. We're not like the Dead Sea where we just take in. We take in all the advice from the world and then kind of get confused by it and don't do anything. We just get built up and we almost implode. Whereas when we take in and we give out, we become healthy and we see it like a tree. Its leaf does not wither. So what we see with a leaf that does not wither, for me, that talks about a perseverance. That actually, even when things are going badly, when things are challenging, we might not always be producing fruit. This isn't a strange tree that always produces fruit. There's a season to it where it produces fruit in season. And so there will be times when we're not in season, but in that season, the leaves don't wither. They don't die. And that talks to me about a perseverance, that even when we're not in season, we keep going. Our roots are still foundational. Our roots keep the tree solid. There's nothing that's going to come and chop us down. And finally, at the end of verse 3, we see this. Whatever they do prospers. Whatever he or she does prospers. And so there's a prosperity that comes when we become like a tree that's planted. So I don't know about you, but for me, that describes very much where I want to get to. I want to grow. I want there to be a permanence in my life that keeps me strong. I want there to be productivity, perseverance, and prosperity. If you remember those 5 things, then that would be really good going away from today. That comes when we take the advice of this psalm. In contrast, and who that compares us to, is not so the wicked. They are like chaff that the wind blows away. And chaff is obviously the bit around the wheat. So when you pick up a bit of wheat and the wind blows it, the wheat is obviously the really useful part that stays, but the chaff is what gets blown away and goes off. And what that says to me for some of us today, in contrast, is: do you want to be someone that's blown away, that's kind of taken away by the circumstances? Something bad happens at work and you kind of get all wobbly and blown away. Something happens at home. Something happens with your friends and you're blown, and you just always feel yourself blown with the wind and with the circumstances. But actually, this psalm offers us an alternative to that. If we become like the tree, if we take the advice in the first 2 verses of how we live that and how we walk into that, we don't have to be blown circumstances. That's how sometimes I feel. I wonder how many of us felt that this week when suddenly, if anyone was affected by all the IT outages and all the problems going on there, suddenly it felt like, oh, could everything fall apart because you're blown by the circumstances, blown by everything going on. But we're offered an alternative in this psalm. One of the pictures that I sort of thought of like this is if you think about a rock that you can take out of that living stream, that stream of water, if you were able to break that rock in half, you would find that the rock is dry on the inside because it doesn't let water in. And it kind of made me think that actually the person that's solid and like a tree doesn't have that. They're not like a rock that you could break open and it's dry on the inside. Actually, we let the living water come into us. We let it flow in us and flow out. Whereas there are others, perhaps the people that are blown like chaff, where actually they can be surrounded by good things, maybe good people, church, those sorts of things. But sometimes they never let that water permeate the rock. They never let it come into them. It talks about having like hearts of stone, and I just wonder whether this is a bit of a challenge to us over the summer when things calm down a little bit. Rather than just taking a holiday and thinking about me, what about thinking about your heart? Does my heart need to be a bit softer in the next season? Do I need to let the water come in? Where is my heart hardened? Where is it I need to become like that tree with the deep roots, firm and strong? So let's go on. We're going to go back to the start now. So we've now seen what happens if we follow this advice, which is, I think we will agree where we want to get to. I hope people are on board with that. I hope people are on board with that's where they want to get to. And what we see at the very start is it starts with the words, blessed is the man, blessed is he or she. And we know that that's offering us really two ways of living. One to be blessed and the other to be blown like the chaff. In Deuteronomy, it's put slightly differently. In verse 19, it says, "This day I call heaven and earth as witnesses against you that I've set before you life and death, blessing and curses. Now choose life so that you and your children may live and that you may love your God." Which way of life are you choosing? Are you choosing the blessed life, like this says, or are you choosing the alternative? Jesus puts it even slightly differently. He talks about the narrow path and the wide path. It's a common theme throughout Scripture. There are two ways to live. One leads to this blessing, and the other leads to perishing, as the psalm tells us. And at the start, where it uses the word blessed, that word actually really means happy. It means to be happy, to be full, to be content. To be like that tree that is well planted. And that's the option we have. And so what does it mean? How do we make sure that we're living on that life? So we start off by seeing the person that isn't blessed. So we've got the alternative here. So there's three things they don't do. They don't walk in step with the wicked, stand in the way that sinners take, or sit in the company of mockers. Now, when I've read this psalm before, I've always focused on the end of those verses. So not walking in step with the wicked, standing in the way of sinners, and mockers. I've always focused on that, so the wicked, the sinners, and the mockers. But as I read it this time, something different appeared to me. And there's three verbs that it talks about: to walk, to stand, and to sit. And I think that's a scale that they're talking about here. It's a scale of how we can start to take the wrong path. So those who walk in step with the wicked. So if you're walking, you're still going somewhere. You still might be heading in the right direction. You're just starting to walk with perhaps the wrong company. And then the next bit, stand in the way of sinners. You've started to stop walking, and you're now standing in the way of sinners. You're starting to stand. You're making a conscious choice not to keep on walking. And then finally, you've got sit in the company of mockers. So you then choose an action to sit down, to be around people, to spend more time with them. And I know this can be a challenge because it kind of is our perspective of who we spend time with. And it's not saying we shouldn't spend time outside of these four walls. That's not what it's saying. But it's what you choose to let come into your life when you do that. It's how much you choose to do that. So let's think about walking in step with the wicked. It's like walking with people that might actually start to lead us slowly down a wrong path. You're walking, it's great, but you're starting to walk slowly along the wrong path. And then you start to stand in the way of sinners. So actually you're consciously choosing to spend a bit more time there. Perhaps too much time. And finally, you've got the sitting. And I thought about the sitting, and I thought, where's there a good explanation of that in the Bible? And when Peter chooses to deny Jesus, what does he go and do? Anyone remember that passage? He goes and sits in the campfire, doesn't he? He chooses to go and sit there amongst other people, and that ultimately leads him to deny Jesus. And you see the power here of what you're choosing to do. And so one of my questions for you today is are you on that path? Is there part of this that you're listening to? Are you starting to walk in the way with the wicked? Or are you starting to stand? Or actually have you made a decision to sit? And that today you need to choose not to sit anymore. You need to get up and walk away. Whatever that is from, however you want to take that, is that what you need to do? Do you need to choose to not be a Peter and sit by the campfire, sit with people that are going to lead you astray? And one thing I'm going to encourage you to do as small groups this week is, having looked at the walk, sit, and stand, start to think about the difference between wicked sinners and mockers. I've not got time to go into it today. But what are the kind of different characteristics that each of those bring? And maybe that's something for you to go away and think about, is who is it that's spending time with you, feeding into you, spending time in your life with you? So we've kind of seen there in the scripture what happens when we don't listen, when we choose not to be blessed. But what's the key? How do we choose to have this blessed life? How do we choose to have this happy and successful life? And we see it here. But his delight is in the law of the Lord. On the law he meditates day and night. That leads to him becoming the tree. So his delight is in the law of the Lord. For the people that read this, the delight in the law of the Lord, just to kind of make it all clear, would have been Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. I don't know about you, but I think I find it hard to delight in that. But that's the truth. There's not just a call to kind of do what God says, there's a choice here to delight in it. With the Olympics coming up, I was thinking about the athletes, and they have a choice to make. They can choose. If they want to win the gold, then they have a choice to make. There's sacrifice they have to make. They choose to go to bed at 10 o'clock rather than staying up late. There's probably some friends they can't go and see. There's a very strict routine. But I'm sure if you ask any gold medal winners, they might have not always found it easy, but there would have been a delight in it because they knew what the end goal was. They knew what the end aim was, and they got there. And the nice thing for us is that we all win the gold medal if we choose it. It's not like the athletes where there are some that will give up everything and might not win the gold. For us, we get the delight of always winning gold if we choose this. But it's a choice to delight yourself in the law of the Lord and meditate on his law day and night. And I was thinking about how we can unpack this word meditate on the law, because I think in a society today where we want things quickly, our attention spans are getting shorter and shorter. What does it really mean to meditate? And for me, I think meditate is about like that kind of in-between gap between theory and action. And so for some of us today, I wonder if actually We understand the word, we understand the scripture, but sometimes it just doesn't permeate our life properly, like that hard rock with the water inside. It doesn't really get in. And maybe that process of meditating, if you think about a similar word in the scripture to like what animals do when they chew the cud, they chew it, they digest it, it's slow. So my challenge to you this week is perhaps rather than choosing to read loads of scripture in your quiet times this week, why don't you just take one verse and let it be that move from theory to action? Let it be that one verse that you choose maybe for 3 or 4 days, and that's what you read in the morning. That's what you remember at the daytime. That's what you kind of regurgitate. You keep speaking that verse. Maybe we get into an opposite rhythm. It's not about how much of the Bible you read, but it's about doing it slower, letting it come in, letting yourself meditate, and let that be the kind of thing that builds you up, that gives you life. We know what the outcome is of this. Growth, permanence, productivity, perseverance, and prosperity. That's the choice I want to take. I'm going to finish with this story that I heard as I was looking about this. There was a man, he was a parachutist and wanted to learn to kind of parachute. And so the instructor had these 4 rules. He said, there are 4 really important rules. Once you understand these and these are firmly in your brain, then you're allowed to jump by yourself. So the 4 rules are, you jump when I say jump, you don't jump before, you don't jump after. You jump when I say so. You then count to 10 seconds and you open your parachute. If it doesn't open, you've then got your reserve parachute. So you pull that cord. That's the 3rd action. So you jump when I say jump. You pull the cord after 10 seconds. If that fails, you pull the 2nd cord. And finally, the 4th one is there will be a bus there that will take you back to the kind of airport afterwards at the bottom. So once you land, walk and make your way over there. Let yourself settle there. So anyway, so this new instructor, he gets ready. He goes up for his first jump. They get to the right height, and the instructor says, okay, jump. So he followed that instruction properly, and he jumped. He then counted to 10, and he did that properly. And he pulled the first cord, and it didn't work. He thought, no panic. It's okay, I've got my emergency one. He pulled his emergency one, and that didn't work either. So he then started to think, and he thought, oh no, well, if the parachute hasn't opened first time, the backup parachute hasn't opened either. I'm not even sure if there'll be a bus there to take me back at the end. And that's my question today, is this offers us very 2 clear ways of life. We can choose to be on the flight that leads to being blessed, that takes us to being that tree, or there's a flight that takes us to perishing. And which flight is it you're going to be on? What is it you're choosing to be on?